Well, hello everybody and welcome to another installment of Weather Impact 101. Today we're going to be talking about some wintry precipitation types. Now in a previous installment, meteorologist Whitney Huddleston talked to you about how difficult it is to forecast winter weather. Today we're going to expand on that just a little bit and talk about what are some of the different types of things that we can see in a winter weather event. Now I'll tell you, in January and February, it's our two coldest months, but as Whitney told you in a previous episode, it's also probably the most difficult time of the year for us meteorologists. So let's talk about this. So there's several different types of precipitation that we can see during a winter weather event. And to understand why that is, we have to start thinking vertically. Now, usually when you see our forecasts on TV, we're talking about aerial coverage. We're talking about looking down on a map and figuring out where it's going to be cold, where it's going to be hot. For winter weather, we have to think vertically. We have to look up into the atmosphere. Now, typically, the way our atmosphere works is that temperatures will cool the higher you get. That's why it is typically colder in Denver than it is in, say, Temple, Texas. Now, sometimes, though, we can get warmer layers of air up in the upper levels of the atmosphere. Let's take a look at this. So if we have warm air basically from the surface all the way up to our clouds, this is a typical springtime event, we're just going to get rain. There is no area where this air is below freezing from the clouds all the way down to the ground. Now the next thing we're going to talk about is freezing rain. Now freezing rain, and we're going to talk more about this in a second, is one of the most dangerous precipitation types that we have. What happens is the ground is below freezing, whereas up in the mid levels of the atmosphere below the clouds, the temperatures are actually above freezing. That's what we call an inversion layer when it gets a little bit warmer above the ground. So what's happening is all this water is falling as liquid, comes through this freezing layer, hits the ground, and then freezes to surfaces. So what happens then is it creates ice skating rinks basically on area roads. It can add a lot of weight to power poles, power lines, and branches as well. That's where we get some of the damage we get during these winter storms. So for that reason, freezing rain, like I said, one of the most dangerous types of winter weather that there is. Sleet is a little bit different. Now, it's just going through a very shallow warm layer. It doesn't spend a whole lot of time above freezing. It spends a lot more time below freezing. So what's happening is it starts as snow, transitions to rain, and then by the time it gets back to the ground, it refreezes. Now, as it refreezes, it cannot refreeze into a snowflake. There is a very specific layer of the atmosphere where snowflakes form. When you happen closer to the ground like this, what's going to happen is it basically just turns into an ice pellet. And for that reason, it actually has more in common with hail than it does with snow. So how do we get snow? Now, are you starting to understand why it's a little difficult to forecast these different types? Because we have to know when the storm is coming. We have to know the temperatures at all these different layers of the atmosphere. It is a very difficult process, and there is one very specific set of circumstances under which we get snow. And that is the atmosphere has to be below freezing from the clouds all the way down to the ground. Now, typically here in Texas, when we get these winter weather events, what happens is the storm comes in before temperatures fall below freezing. That's why we get all these different varieties. And a little bit more rarely is when we see a little bit of snow falling on the ground. So let's take a look at some of the situations we can run into. This is why freezing rain is a little bit more dangerous. You'll notice our little graphic here, our car spins out on the freezing rain, but this truck is driving just fine through the sleet. It's because the sleet, since it's pellets, can actually be moved out of the way by your car tires. This car over here on the freezing rain, this is a skating rink. There is no grab. There is no traction between the tires and the ground. You can't push it out of the way. You can push sleet pellets out of the way. Same with snow too. You can get some traction in snow, but by far the most dangerous situation to drive in is freezing rain. With that being said, if we have a winter weather event, our advice is always to stay at home and not travel unless you absolutely have to. But if we had to rank them, yes, freezing rain would absolutely be the most dangerous. So what happens if you find that you are losing control of your vehicle? Well, just keep steering the wheel straight. Don't try to turn. If your car is going in a straight line, it will continue to go in a straight line. Do not try and turn the wheel. Do not brake. Just gently take your foot off the accelerator to slow down. And then once you find traction, once you feel those wheels grip again, that's when you can gently apply the brake. So that is our best advice for driving in freezing rain. Again, the most dangerous of the varieties when it comes to winter weather. But again, that is why it is so difficult to forecast winter weather, and those are the different types of precipitation that we can see. Tune in again in a couple of weeks when we'll have a new episode of Weather Impact 101 right here on 6 Plus. For now, I'm Chief Meteorologist Matt Farrell saying thank you for watching.